I've never liked that kind of talk when someone says like, oh, you just have to like will yourself to do it. Today we're going to talk about, excuse me. Come on. Today we're going to talk about motivation and how we can improve it. If you're new here, my name is Kati Morton and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Now the question I received says, hi Kati, I was wondering if you had any tips on improving motivation. Recently, a close family member died who I was extremely close with, and ever since I've been so unmotivated and exhausted some days, spending the whole day in bed, only getting up when I absolutely have to. My therapist has told me that I just have to find the willpower to find the motivation. That's not helpful. But I've tried and I genuinely can't. It's just adding to the numbness I already feel. Okay, there is a lot to unpack in this question. And the first thing my little therapist spidey senses went to is depression. When we lose a loved one, we grieve them, right? We go through a process of grief. Now, diagnostically speaking, things have changed over the years. We used to think that bereavement, that's what they call the grieving process, and that's how they kind of diagnose it, if you will. Bereavement should last, they used to say, about 6 months. Now, I don't know about you, but I've lost, unfortunately, a lot of people in my life, and grief doesn't have a time limit. It kind of comes and goes off and on for years. And so they've kind of shifted things to talk about grief and that it can last for the person depending on the issue, right? As we already knew, they've kind of removed that 6-month window. But they still say that I believe, and I'd have to double check my facts, but I believe it's about a year. If you're still experiencing those symptoms, it could be diagnosed as depression. So taking that into consideration, let's think about the person who asked this question. They were saying that they lost somebody that they loved and they haven't been feeling motivated. Now, when anybody ever tells me they don't feel motivated, my therapist spidey sense thinks depression. Because if anybody hasn't been depressed, one of the first things to go is motivation, then concentration, and then it can be like our hope. Right? Depression can remove a lot of what I would call the joy in our life. It's kind of like these dark blinders that come in and make everything feel like too much effort, not worth it, and not enjoyable, right? And so when this person asks this question about motivation, I don't really think that's what's going on. And what your therapist said, unfortunately, isn't helpful. Like to find the willpower. I've never liked that kind of talk when someone says like, oh, you just have to like will yourself to do it. Or like people online will talk about like, go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up and do it. Sure, if we're procrastinating on something because it's not something we really want to do, but that doesn't apply if we're grieving, if we struggle with depression, anxiety, any kind of mental illness. That's not helpful, and that can actually compound the shame or the blame or the guilt that we already feel about our situation. And so the person who asked this question, I want to let you know that I would tell your therapist that you wonder if it's your grief that is causing you to feel so unmotivated and exhausted all the time. Or if maybe what we think is happening is major depressive disorder. Because some of the symptoms of MDD or major depressive disorder are lack of interest in the things we used to have interest in, feeling down most days, all day for about 2 weeks, changes in our sleep, changes in our appetite, difficulty concentrating. You can see how all of this could be what you're going through. Let them know. Talk about it. Ask about it. You could also talk to a psychiatrist if medication is something that you're interested in. And you can ask questions about what medications are out there, what the side effects are, how long you'd have to be on it, all of that good stuff, and see if that's a possibility for you as well. Now that's the piece for this question that I think is important. Is it depression or is it grief or is it part of both, right? And I honestly don't really, as a therapist, feel the need to tease that out. I think grief feels like depression. I've lost a lot of people in my family and the weight of that is so heavy. It's sometimes hard to pull ourselves out. So give yourself time and some compassion as you process the loss. It's hard. I'd love to say, yeah, it gets better right away and presto, within 6 months, you're better. No. And I also don't want you to think that time heals all wounds. I hate that. That's not the truth. Time doesn't make anything better. It just gives us more time to stuff it down. But time does also allow for us to talk to others about those happy memories we've had, cry about the things we miss about that person. So take that time and make sure you're doing some of that, okay? And that could be through journaling, that could be through therapy, that could be through both of those things. But another component, and I made some notes about this, because if anybody out there is like, well, I'm not grieving, but I'm not motivated. It's hard for me to get myself started, right? I did something recently So I was listening to a podcast, the Huberman Lab. I think it's great. I would encourage you to check it out if you haven't. I don't remember which episode it was, but the man who runs the podcast said something, and I wrote it down. He said, viewing sunlight in the morning causes about a 50% increase in circulating cortisol, epinephrine, and dopamine. These leverage healthy increases in energy, immune system function, and mood. And this was in 2022. And if you don't know who Andrew Huberman is, he's a professor of neurobiology at Stanford Medicine. He said that back in 2022. I listened to that podcast maybe, let's say, 6 months after that. Recently, Sean and I had to get up on a Saturday because we had gone out to dinner with friends on Friday and our neighbor had watched Roxy. But we didn't get back till 10:30 and she went to bed at 10. And so I was like, oh, we'll come get her in the morning. So Sean and I kind of started waking up at like 9 o'clock, which is actually really early for us on a Saturday. And I usually would wake up, go pee, and go back to bed. But we wanted to get our dog. We missed her. So we got up, got out, and walked the block to get her. So we walked and got Roxy. We were out in the sunshine, you guys, bright and early in the morning. First thing, barely got up, brushed my teeth, went pee, went and got her. Came back, and I have never had a day I'll be honest, probably in the past like 4 years where I felt better. My mood was amazing, and I felt super motivated, and I got so much accomplished that day. And I'm not saying you have to accomplish things for it to be worthwhile, but that was my experience. And as I reflected on this, I realized that I had done what Huberman told me to do over a year ago. Get outside and get some sunlight on your face first thing. If you have a dog that needs to be walked, I encourage you, just like that morning, when you wake up and get outside for just like 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. It changes your mood. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. It increases sugars or glucose in the bloodstream, enhances your brain's use of glucose, and increases the availability of substances that repair tissues. Also, cortisol curbs functions that would be non-essential or are harmful in a fight-flight situation. Wow. Then epinephrine, right, plays a role in metabolism, attention, focus, panic, and excitement. And finally, dopamine is responsible for allowing you to feel pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. There's that word, motivation. So if you're struggling to feel motivated, get outside first thing, okay? Second tip is to check in on what you're working towards. Because often I think we're not motivated because the thing that we're trying to do, we don't like doing. And so often we can feel pressure societally or maybe from a boss or a teacher or whatever to do something we don't want to do. Now, I'm not advocating that we just don't do the things we don't want to do, but notice if that's like 90% of your day, maybe we need to either change jobs, change majors if we're in school, or maybe we need to increase other things, right? If what I have to do to pay my bills or to get my education isn't things that I always love, then what can I do in my free time that I do love? It's essentially balancing the scales of stuff that's not exciting, not motivating. It's not going to trigger any dopamine release, that's for sure. So I want to bring up the things that do. I know, again, life is filled with things we don't want to do, and we're going to just have to maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 do it, even though I don't love that. But maybe we have to just do it to get paid. But then when we leave work, maybe we go on hikes with people and we learn about different trees in our area. Maybe we go play with animals. Maybe we learn to play guitar or piano or, I don't know, coding to put a game together. Whatever you're excited about. Let's try something that is fulfilling. And that can be motivating. And that makes the other thing worthwhile. Oh, I work so that I can pay to go snowboarding on the weekends or to take those guitar lessons or to do whatever. So that's another kind of thing that I think we need to do. So research shows us that we cannot remember more than 7 things at once. We can't hold it in our working memory, like 7 tasks. So if you're feeling unmotivated or you feel like I'm just never completing the things I want to, and it just keeps dragging me down and I feel like I can't get there. Another tip for kind of motivation and keeping us feeling empowered and accomplished is to put together to-do lists each and every day with no more than 7 things. And each of those 7 things needs to be doable in an hour or 2. If it isn't, then you need to break it into smaller tasks. I know that's a lot, but I promise you, you will feel the difference. And I'll also be honest, most of my to-do lists every day are like 3 or 4 items because I know I won't do more than that. I can't accomplish more than that because those things take a few hours and I only have so many hours in a day. So just think about it. but make sure it's not more than 7. Oftentimes when we're feeling overwhelmed or we're feeling like nothing is getting done and we're not motivated to do it, we'll make these huge lists of the things that we want to do and then almost like immediately feel overwhelmed by it even more and hopeless to get it going. And so make sure your to-do lists are manageable. And if you have a huge list of stuff that you want to do, here's a trick I learned, and I wish I could remember the person who mentioned this, but they have, here, I'm just going to use Sean's tinted table book. Take your journal. Take a piece of paper and fold it inwards. I'm not going to ruin his new book, but fold it inwards and then open it back up so you have a crease down the middle, okay? Now, as it's open, on the right side of that crease, I want you to write all that stuff, right? You're like, I have so much stuff I want to do. I need to do my laundry. I need to mend that button on that thing. I need to call my aunt. I need to wash the dog. I need to, all the things, whatever it is. Put it all down there. Fold it back closed. On the outside, you make your shorter list. Now you pull things from that other list, and as you pull them to that outside flap that's not going to be too long, you mark them off of the inside. And each and every week, I encourage you to use a new page, update it. There might be things that you've taken off of that inside list or things that you want to add. And I want you to feel free, like it's a working document, but it's also, you're able to put everything down so that you don't feel like you're going to forget anything, but it's not going to be overwhelming when you look at what you need to accomplish that day or that week. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Those are just some of the tools and techniques that help me. And then there's also, because I'm a therapist and I can't help it, I need to mention the HALT acronym. When we're not feeling motivated, a lot of times it has to do with our self-care. And yes, self-care has gotten this like bad rep, and people use it to say that we need to like take vacations that cost thousands of dollars and go get massages which cost hundreds of dollars. And I know we're all pretty broke right now. That's a lot of money, and self-care should cost you $0. That's why I love the HALT acronym. It's an acronym from Dialectical Behavior Therapy, or DBT, and it stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I love that acronym because it just gives us an opportunity to check in with how we're doing. Am I hungry? Have I eaten in the last 3 to 4 hours? Am I angry? Is something going on that I'm upset about that I haven't talked about, haven't vented about, journaled about, processed in some way? Am I lonely? Have I taken time to connect with people who truly know who I am? Am I tired? How's my sleep? And I would even add in there's another acronym, not going to get all the way through it, but in DBT they call it ABCs, please. It's an extended version of HALT, and it adds in things like physical health and illness, like taking care of those things and making sure you're taking your medication as prescribed when you need to. Now, I'm saying all of these things because that's all self-care. That's what we need to do to help us feel better, to feel more motivated, more empowered and excited about our life. We need to make sure we've eaten. We need to make sure we're sleeping, we're connected with people, we've processed some of that anger we're feeling, we're taking our medication, maybe we had a shower. A shower can change your life sometimes. All of those, what I'd call basic self-care, is really the foundation for motivation. And so if those things are falling to the wayside, especially if we're struggling with depression or other mental illnesses, we're not going to be able to accomplish all these things and feel like we're motivated to do it. We might have to start small, where our to-do list is shower and call one friend. That's plenty. Sometimes that's more than we can do in a day. So just check in with yourself. Notice if you're not feeling motivated because of a mental health issue, grief, depression, or if we're not feeling motivated because what we're engaging with in life just isn't fulfilling, or if we're not feeling motivated because we haven't taken care of ourselves for whatever reason. Those are just some of the kind of the triad of things that I want to check in on to see where the motivation's coming from. Because sure, I could Google online and how do you get motivated? Oh, make sure, you have a short to-do list. Make sure you reward yourself when you accomplish it. And we can go through all of that. And there are ways to keep us motivated. But for a lot of us, it's just that getting started. It's those first few steps that feel impossible. So give yourself time and be patient. Check in on those things, and hopefully that helps give you that boost to get going. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time.